What's up, everybody? It's Phil here. Welcome back to the Death and Narratives podcast, episode 4. I got Conrad with me again for a special birthday episode. We got special intros and outros. We're going to be talking about the Iran war. It is, what is it now? Day 29 coming up on the month mark. The war that was supposed to last a couple hours and then a couple days and now a couple weeks and now a couple months probably. I want to talk about BRICS. I want to talk about India especially. I want to talk about maybe some of the new leadership in Iran and maybe China. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things we'll cover, but let's get into it.
اضرب.
All right, so day 29 of the Iran war. One thing I really wanted to talk about right now is the state of BRICS, because I think we harped on a lot in the past few episodes about how scary it is that there are messianic, religious, occultic-like beliefs kind of pushing this war, but it's also a war based on regular geopolitics, and primarily a war on BRICS in Iran, especially because Iran was about to complete the north-south corridor, which goes, it connects basically India to Russia, and then on to Europe. Iran is kind of the central node to that, as well as being a central node to the Belt and Road Initiative. A lot of these projects were very close to being finished, and I believe the port of Chabahar, which is the southern node of the north-south corridor, got hit pretty hard, at least as hard as the Americans could muster it. So I think it's important to frame this war in that dimension as well. It's a war against BRICS, and really, I think Pepe Escobar, who's probably the best analyst on this and been following this, and I agree with his assessment on this, that South Africa and Brazil right now are sort of irrelevant, and that leaves kind of the big three: Russia, China, India. What are called the Primakov Triangle from Yevgeny Primakov. These are the largest nations by population and land mass, and very history to pass, and they have huge potential to be the new multipolar centers of the world. And so that leaves, RIC, what would you call Russia, India, China. That seems now to be changing. My view of India has really, and I think a lot of other people's, has really gone in the toilet in these past couple weeks. Something that I think the conservatives, I will admit, were a bit early on. I think the Vivek hate and the Indian hate in a sort of maybe racist way, in a sort of anti-immigrant way. But wow, the Indians are really doing some really stupid and horrible things right now, and it really is reconfiguring, I think, the Primakov triangle, the RIC, now to be Russia, Iran, China. And I want to know what you think about India right now, because it is, so the next BRICS summit is supposed to be held in India. It's their go-round, which is not the best timing. And I think the what really was starting to get me skeptical was, do you remember the early story about the AI summit that happened in India? And there was a huge controversy just because it was so really poorly managed. And then there was a university there that they had taken Chinese off-the-shelf drones that had AI technology and just were showing them at the summit as if it was their own. And I think that kind of underscored, part of this is a stereotype, but stereotypes often come from truth, right? This sort of scheming, scam-like nature of the Indians right now, and the hedging nature, kind of the Turkey Erdogan kind of axis, right? The kind of those plays to try and play both sides, trying to play America as well as playing China and Russia at the same time, and trying to get the best of both worlds. But I think those games have really come to a head. The backdooring and the scheming and the scamming has really come to a head. And previous to the Iran war, Modi visited visited Israel and gave a whole long-winded speech at the Knesset. And that was basically his way of prostrating himself at the altar of Zionism and signaling to them that he's there for them more than he is there for BRICS right now, which was really I think maybe one of the stupidest moves he could have made at the time. And the timing was really horrible because, then the Iran war happened, I think, not but a week later. And then the more recent developments were that there was a military parade, naval military parade happening in India. And Iran was invited. They sent one of their destroyers, of which they have few of. They don't have a large navy. They really barely have a navy. And they went there. They marched in the parade, as well as a lot of India's other allies and a lot of BRICS nations. And about 8 to 11 minutes after leaving port, a U.S. submarine sunk the ship. And they also refused to hold and quarter the men who were sinking in the ship, which is a war crime. I think Pete Hegseth explicitly said we will refuse to quarter for our enemies now, which is also saying that is a war crime, I believe, under the Geneva Convention. So after that happened, the Indian Coast Guard, nor the Navy even came to help, and the Indian government, the foreign ministry, didn't even release a statement. No statement. So completely silent. The Sri Lankan, I can't remember if it was the Navy or the Coast Guard, but they were the ones who came to help. And I think the Iranians remembered that in kind, because I heard a story that they were letting some of their oil out of the Strait of Hormuz without question. What do you think of this? I mean, this is a really big problem, I'll say, for BRICS in its configuration right now because India plays a prominent role. They have the rotating conference next. That kind of means it would have been on them to sort of push forward the new de-dollarization approach. But now that it seems like they have, I won't say abandoned that because I'm sure that they still think they're hedging both sides. But I think China and Russia understand that. How can you have an economic alliance? They're also in the SCO, I believe. How can you have economic and military alliances with people who are literally going to your enemies, giving speeches, at the Knesset, most likely giving them intelligence to sink your allies' ships, and then not even saying anything about it? I mean, BRICS in this configuration is really untenable, and I think it is sort of wartime morphing into something else, which I think Iran might step up to take that position just by necessity because they're the ones getting attacked. And we've seen with the Ukraine war, it's like once you get attacked, that's when it really forces you to change your economy more to, rebuff the West and de-dollarize. When you aren't getting attacked, you're kind of always hedging and moving slowly because I think you've always said there's always a world war when the international banking and finance system changes, right? So I think for previous years, BRICS, it was kind of thinking like we're going to go slow and we're not going to fully de-dollarize. We're just going to make alternatives, and they were trying to do this kind of piecemeal thing where they're like, let's just maybe we can slowly boil the frog and just slowly pile up changes in the financial system till one day, all of a sudden we can just fully de-dollarize because we've got all this infrastructure brick by brick, no pun intended, built up, instead of having a World War III catastrophic. But now it almost seems like in order to prevent that, America has gone to war with them, and now they've forced them, right? And Iran has been doing petro-yuan, which I predicted in the last episode, and the news is happening so fast, the prediction is almost just like reporting, it's like, I predict this is going to happen, then like the next day it happens, so this is going crazy. But what do you think of all that, India's role in BRICS and BRICS in general, and how it's getting reconfigured with this war? Because the petro-yuan thing, that's something, Pepe Escobar was saying, that's something that China, Russia, India, Brazil, some of the partners would probably have liked to do, but they wouldn't have got that through in years and years and years, of doing diplomacy, doing this piecemeal, approach. But now, within 3 or 4 weeks, it's happened with a stroke, of a few missiles.
I think India is... it's an extremely complicated political system. They've got dozens and dozens of political parties and dozens of factions that are vying for control of the country. The BJP is it's more conservative, and I think Modi leans back more towards India's long-term policies, which they had during the Cold War. India was traditionally tried to maintain neutrality and created like a neutral bloc during the Cold War. They didn't really take the side of China and Russia or the West. They just sort of wanted to stay out of the conflict and position themselves in the best possible course that they could have taken. I think now this sort of neutrality position that like Erdogan and Modi are taking, this like Turkey and India approach, where they're trying to sort of stay on the fence. Um, it's not. I think they're gonna they'll come around. I think they will come around to the winning side because at the end of the day, those guys want to be on the winning side. Um, but they're hesitant to cut ties with the West and to lose whatever. I mean, I'm sure they have massive amounts of investment from America, massive amounts of investment from Europe, um, and I think it's just short sighted calculation that they're playing. Um, they've wanted to maintain those ties with the West for throughout. I mean, this escalatory period, which started under Biden with the Ukraine war, where they were sort of tacitly in support of Russia, but they were urging a lot of restraint because they're making a lot of money off of this conflict, and they do have pretty good ties with Europe and the United States, which I think a lot of the reason that the war in Ukraine has been so restrained is probably because of India and India's diplomatic pressure that they've been applying to Russia. I think China has probably played a role in that as well, but to a lesser extent. I think it's a weakness for BRICS at the moment, but eventually, the Indians are. I think they will come around. They are a little bit of an outlier in those three countries in Russia, China, India, which Russia had a communist revolution against the old czarist system, the old capitalist system, feudal system. China, same thing. India didn't really go through that.
Right.
India had, they had a peaceful independence movement, which the UK granted to them because they didn't have the power to restrain their ability to hold on. But I think there is sort of a soft spot for the West in India. And there's kind of an idea that if the old sort of, we don't necessarily have to fight them, we'll just sort of play along, and maybe we'll get a good outcome from this. Nobody wants this war right now. No, the Indians are certainly not going to be. I mean, they're going to be some of their oil costs are going to be out of control. But I think there is a strong desire to maintain ties with the West. I don't think it's. I mean, they pretty much. Was it the Trump tariffs that really pushed them over the? I can't remember exactly what the details were, but there was some sort of Trump demand that India had to stop buying Russian oil or only buy it at a certain price.
Yeah, they put I think 100% tariff on Russian imported oil into India, and then India had this whole diplomatic freak out, and then I think they kind of made up, and I think that's possibly a part of this situation because now you see the Trump administration kind of trying to court India a little bit more. Like you saw Laura Loomer, I don't know if you followed her freakish face, but she was in India and doing a bunch of media there and trying to kind of add India to the Middle Eastern Quad, which they have there. And so I think they've been sucked into that. They're probably getting some sort of tariff or sanction relief because of that. I mean, I think they did get Russian oil import sanction and tariff relief. So I think it's a short term. It's the opposite, right? It's the short term gain for long term pain thing that's happening with them. And I think you bring a good point, which is really important to underscore with India is, yeah, China and Russia both had Marxist, Leninist revolutions. India's revolution, although anti-imperial in some sort of nature, was more of like a liberal kind of anti-violence sort of thing, and it didn't really have a critique of class politics, of the caste system, and so those certain things remain there in a sort of neo-colonial way in which they don't quite remain in Russia and China, and you got to look at these leaders like Xi Jinping and look at the parties they're in, right? Like Communist Party of China, Putin like was in the KGB. Modi, it's speculated, was in a clique that literally killed Gandhi. So, this is not a nice guy. The BJP party is Hindu nationalist, right? So they also hate a lot of Muslims and Arabs, and there's a lot of ideological tensions there, which in a weird way sort of align with the Israeli ideologies. And I shouldn't say Indians, I should say, Modi's party and Modi himself, because like you said, there are huge, very populous parts of in India that are socialists, Maoists, progressive, Democrats, even just more sane liberals and conservatives. And a lot of those other factions have kind of been locked out of the higher levers of power, at least like federally in India, which sort of colors it in this weird way, just how America is, where you do have actually a lot of political diversity, but you only have a few sort of opinions that are sort of allowed, to rise at least higher than the local level. But that's been really bad for India, and I think they're smart enough to have joined BRICS, but they're not smart enough to understand that, you're going to get sidelined if you join some of these things and then you actively, fight against people that are the nations that are inside of them. And like you said, I do think that they will come around just based off of the fact that Israel will lose and America will lose, eventually. And they're going to have to understand that they're closer nations that literally by proximity is China and Russia than it is, America and Israel, and that we're going to have to normalize with them. And that they will need that infrastructure, because if you look at the infrastructure between China and Russia and India, it doesn't compare in India. And I'm sorry, that's not about their culture. It's about their political system that they built after, anti-imperial struggle. It really is not very different from a Western economy. It's highly privatized, and there's a lot of neoliberalism. So they haven't developed their industrial capacity, their human capital. I know I don't really like that word, but they really haven't developed that. Just roads and hospitals and buildings, like they haven't developed like they should have. And so they have a lot of potential, but right now it's very unrealized. And I think the more and more the BJP and Modi go down this sort of playing both sides role, the longer and longer they prolong that necessary development that they need, and I think that's sad. But the long and short of it is, when we look at that strategy, that Turkey strategy, that India strategy, a few other nations do this. The reality is you cannot play both sides. This is like saying, and I don't want to make this too biblical, but this is like saying like, oh, I'm going to be a Catholic, but I'm also going to be a Satanist just to make sure, I can get, God bless me and then also do all my evil sins. It's like, you can't be like, oh, I'm going to be a part of the de-dollarization, new, anti-Western, we're going to have multipolarity, but I'm also going to work economically and militarily and not just work with them, but like pass them information to like create casualties for these other people that I'm in a group with. That de facto that means that you're on their side, and you can do certain things with BRICS, but like, it is sort of an all or nothing thing. Like if you have NGOs there, if you are fifth columnists, if you pass information, then you're only going to be undermining the rest of the entire project. And so de facto that means you're a collaborator, and you the thing with the West is that there is no appeasing them. And I think a certain country like India has a certain amount of leverage because it's a large player. They have a certain amount of power. They have a large population. Don't have China's industrial base, but they do have an industrial base, and they have an army, and so they have weight to throw around, unlike some other countries. But if India thinks that they can, appease their way out of certain things at the West, as well as court, the rest of the East and Eurasia, I think what they'll find is that the West will continue to want more and more and more from them, and they'll take and take and take, and they'll take over, and they'll instrumentalize them, and that will not be good for India's development in the short to long term. If that happens, then that means India would become a beachhead against China. And they're nowhere near that, but in terms of the trajectory, that's what the ultimate trajectory would be. And I think that's very dangerous for them. But I am glad that Iran is stepping up, a nation which I had not really much taken into account before the maybe before the Ukraine war and a larger geopolitical picture kind of came into my analysis. But this is a country most Americans can't find on a map. It is that bad. Yeah, it is a country most Americans would be confused to realize that it's different from Iraq, that they're different countries, that they have different letters on the end. It is a country that's been sanctioned by us for decades on end, that we've been fighting in covert and overt ways, that has developed a underground industrial military machine that the likes of which we cannot rebuff. And with just a few steps, they are really de-dollarizing the Middle East, not just expelling them. They're not just expelling, I should say, us, I guess, from the Middle East, but they are changing the way that oil is bought and sold in the Middle East. And we discussed this privately, but this very much mirrors the Suez Canal crisis with Egypt, because Egypt puts a toll of anything that goes through the Suez Canal, and Iran has never done that for the Strait of Hormuz, which, when you think about it, is a bit insane, right? Because you're in the middle of the world, you have this huge choke point, and some of it is in your territorial waters. You'd think you'd at least do something, but Iran, by the liberals and the people who are less hardline have always thought that is a step too far, maybe a red line for the Gulf countries and their Western backers. But now within 4 weeks they've completely changed the script, and they are one of the only oil producers getting a vast amount of oil out of the Strait of Hormuz. So not only it's March 28th. So within 3 or 4 weeks, not only have they expelled a lot of Americans and NATO forces from the Middle East, they've basically taken over the administration of the Strait of Hormuz. They've basically crippled every other Gulf state's capacity to export oil, and now they've gotten rid of the petrodollar, at least in the Strait of Hormuz, and turned it into a petro yuan system, which I predicted and came true. And that is really unprecedented, and I don't think it will be very soon that the Gulf countries are able to rebuild. We were also talking about this, some of this oil infrastructure. I just mentioned to you, I was watching There Will Be Blood, the movie about like drilling oil in the middle, and just how much effort, and they were doing it pre-mechanization here, so, and you're seeing this hellish landscape of like drilling a hole and like, then getting all this pipelines and all these things and doing it in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure and making sure people who are working on there can live there and all this stuff. I mean, it's not, a lot of it is mass produced. A lot of it is, produced by hand somewhat. Some of this infrastructure, you can't just order it. You have to like design it and fashion it. So this may be years before the Gulf states recover from this, and that pretty much gives Iran a huge advantage. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I don't know if you want to go to another story or you have thoughts on that.
Let's answer that in a second. I think I just wanted to touch on the India again. I will say that I have heard reports that that destroyer that was sunk, which they gave coordinates to the United States Navy, what I've heard is that they gave those coordinates as a way of sort of disclosing it as like, this ship's unarmed, like just let it go back. Okay. They weren't. I don't necessarily think they were trying to sabotage Iran. So it's possible.
But wouldn't they put out a statement though and say that then? Because that would be really bad if that happened. I mean,
I think I just wanted to.
All right, but yeah, just for reporting's sake, we'll put that caveat in there.
The other thing is I think that a lot of India's sort of their geopolitical like triangulation is does have to do with, you touched on it a little bit, this like rivalry with China. I don't think that I think a lot of their leadership views China as a threat, and they do have some problems with China.
Yeah, they have the border disputes and stuff.
Yeah, the West is, I would think, would be very excited to like create tension from. So I think there's also an anxiety about China overtaking them. As you can see, it's not the petro rupee. It's the petro yuan. Right. Everybody knows China's ascendant. Yeah, and India is lagging behind China in economic development, even though India
has more people.
It has more people, and its revolution was not as bloody as the Chinese Revolution. Yeah. And it's such a complicated place. There's all this. It was, as a colony, it was larger, including Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh, right. And it was broken up to pit those. It's same as like Sykes-Picot, to pit those places against each other. And it would have been better if they had retained complete independence, like China and Russia. But it would have been a fight for sure. Moving on though back to the Gulf states. I don't think these Gulf countries have much of a future in their current states. Yeah. Their governments, at least, do not have much of a future. I think they are essentially creations of the oil complex and the West. I don't think that they'll really exist without oil revenue. Right. They don't exist. They are essentially what it's like these neocons were calling Russia. They're just
Yikes.
gas stations. It's the desert. They rely entirely on all this oil wealth that was created to build these huge cities, these huge modern cities in places like Dubai. But before that became a major export, nothing was there. It was just the desert, and it was tribes vying for control. These there's Emiratis, these these leaders they're put in power and given billions of dollars to rule these places. They're not popular. They're not liked. They're not. They're largely not even in control of their countries. You saw during the Arab Spring these massive revolutions where I don't think that tension has been alleviated. Nobody is a fan of their government. Their governments in these places like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, especially.
Yeah. Bahrain is bad.
Yeah, I think their future is going to be determined by Iran. Which has now asserted control over the Persian Gulf. It's in the name. It's been the Persian. They've got the most coastline,
Right.
And they're going to have to either cozy up to Iran, or their whole governments are going to not exist in a state anymore. Their rulers have, I think, been granted power by the United States. This is kind of a tactic that Western colonial powers have used for a long time, which is you put a minority leadership in control of somewhere like Syria.
Yeah.
You put out the Alawite
Right.
family, the Assad family. You put them in control. The French put them in control. They're 12% of the population, and in this big majority Shia and Sunni country, and that makes those rulers have to rely on Western help. So I think that's a similar situation in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. They are so dependent on the American military presence. They've, I think, overvalued America's power, overestimated America's power. They've had this military presence for 20 years. The petrodollar system has made them extremely rich, and it's been a good agreement for their ruling class, at least, not necessarily for average people, but those ties, I think, will run pretty deep, and their instincts are going to be to stick with the West. But I don't really think that they have the power to suppress their populations, which don't like them.
Yeah.
They don't want them in power, and you need at least a large minority of people to support you to maintain a government. You need at least 15% of your population to be very very in favor of the government and have some sort of justification. But they don't really have much of a justification. It's for their existing. I was thinking about Jordan too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a weird place.
It's so insane. Yeah. That you have you have and I would say Lebanon too, where it's like you have a government who is getting invaded by another nation, Israel, and instead of that government being at war with Israel, they're at war with Hezbollah and trying to disarm them, because Hezbollah needs to be disarmed. Oh, I lost connection a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That you said started with Lebanon.
But yeah, Lebanon, which is so backwards, right, that they have a government that's fighting Hezbollah instead of fighting Israel. Israel is invading them, but the government, the army there is trying to disarm Hezbollah instead of trying to disarm Israel. And Hezbollah is the only people, this militia, political party, revolutionary sort of group that started to defend Lebanon themselves. I mean, it's so backwards, and it's just like, if a system like that continues to happen as like southern Beirut is getting like bombed, that government can only maintain itself for so long. And we saw that with Afghanistan, like when we pulled out, the government just collapsed in a number of days. So all these governments that we prop up, if they don't have the backing militarily and funding wise, they're just going to collapse. And I think, this isn't a prediction section, but here's a prediction. Kuwait is going to be once again part of Iraq. Bahrain will be once again part of Iran. I really do believe that some of these sort of carved out mini micronations that, like you said, are, what was the like Lindsey Graham formulation? The like, it's a country masquerading, or a gas station masquerading as a country. That's what those countries really are. And yeah, they were once a part of these other larger nations with Arab and Muslim and Persian minorities, or majorities rather. Those are going to be subsumed back into those countries. And I think you mentioned the Sykes-Picot, which is such a big part of this whole region, because a lot of these borders weren't, they were pretty much drawn up by the British, and they weren't organic in the sense that people on the ground there didn't go, this is Syria. That was a construction. And you can see it in the way some of the borders are even drawn, right? And like you said, they're constructed to sort of encircle a few ethnicities and minority groups in a weird sort of geographical location, and then, make one play off the other and make other play off another one, and, sort of move them around like chess pieces on a board. And that's just becoming more and more untenable to do. No one really has the large global empire like the British did. The American empire is falling to disarray. And it just seems like if you look at not only ethnicities, but like geography, and you look at the map in the Middle East, it's pretty easy to see how like some of those borders just don't make sense. And that, almost as a natural consequence of the turning of history, that those borders will have to realign to what makes sense, what people can, in certain geographies, form a coherent government, And like you said, there's all these countries, these Gulf states that have basically, even their development is basically just based on, we can extract oil, and therefore we can pay to build all this stuff, which was never here. There were just herders and fucking people in the desert that would set up camp here every now and again and then keep moving, because who would settle here? It doesn't make sense, So a lot of this stuff is just unnatural. So it's going to slowly morph back, or maybe quickly now that things are happening in a rapid pace. It's going to quickly start morphing back into what the post-Ottoman Empire really should have turned into, which I think we're missing in the Middle East. And I think is a cause of a lot of strife in the Middle East, is you just have these countries that just don't make any fucking sense, man. Yeah.
To just expand on that a little bit, I mean, if you look at the history of what we call the Middle East, the Fertile Crescent or Asia Minor, maybe include Iran in that. It's been controlled by so many different political entities throughout history. So many different empires have originated there. it does have like a certain configuration that you see on a map, which almost looks like, you know, which is it maintains the same sort of like geographic size.
Yeah.
Yep. You look at the Persian Empire, which it started with the Iranian Empire, let's say. They controlled Turkey,
Yeah.
Iraq, Syria, Israel, modern day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt. Alexander the Great, and the same thing. They were broken up after Alexander the Great. There's just various periods where there were Arabic empires there that lasted a long time, and it's very possible that. I think you're right. I think this is the end of Sykes-Picot. This is probably a moment where that is kind of dead and gone. Potentially, it is possible that they could survive. These nations could survive and just have different governments. Mm-hmm. But I think we could definitely be seeing the end of Sykes-Picot, and a more sort of natural configuration for the Fertile Crescent. A more normal historical configuration. Yeah. The Ottomans never controlled the Saudi Arabia or the lower part of the Arabian Peninsula, but they did. They had Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Kuwait, Palestine, and Egypt for a little while. Those things they kind of were together traditionally. It's such a long history, it's thousands of years that it goes back. It's the beginning of civilization started there, or at least it was one of the origins of human agricultural civilization. So it's hard to say, but these really random borders that were designed to create chaos and be controlled from far away by Britain and France. I think it's a done deal at this point. America stepped in for what will amount to historically a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And they took the reins and they screwed it up because Americans don't understand.
We're too crude.
Arabic culture at all. They don't understand the society, the geography, the values of those people.
Yeah.
And it's.
Well, what you just said reminds me of Vietnam, because I remember when we went to Vietnam and we were going to all the war museums, and there's so many war museums in every city, multiple ones, and the one of them that we went to in Saigon, I think one of them, it just has this whole room where it's just like panorama 360 of like the Mongols invaded us, and the Chinese invaded us, and the French invaded us, and my stupid Anglo-Western American brain thought, oh, America, we were really the ones to, try and take it to Vietnam. It's like, no, you were the last one in a long list of butt whoopings. You know what I mean? And that, and we were the period. You go there now. Go look at there. Like, if you haven't been there, it's very prosperous. It's thriving. It's very independent. Even with China on its doorstep. And we were the nail in the coffin of ending the colonial history. And, that may be happening with, other regions, other entire regions of the whole world that we're in. We may be like the period on imperialism and the beginning, the death of imperialism, sort of running to die, and the birth of multipolarity, struggling to be born, I think I also wanted to say what you were talking about reminded me, some analyst said, I can't remember who, unfortunately, was talking about how there's really been a death of secular Arabism throughout this whole thing, because if you look at Syria, here's the two dialectical dimensions of Sykes-Picot. Like Syria, a very diverse nation where you can install an ISIS guy because there's so many different factions that will fight against each other. But at the same time, it was a sort of, when it functioned and when Assad, had a semblance of, regularity in the country, it was one of the most developed and stable countries in the Middle East and one of the most diverse. And there's something beautiful about that. And it was, Alawites, Arabs, and Shias and Sunnis, but it was secular in that, okay, we support Palestine tacitly through Iran and the kind of pan-Arab project in a way, but we are not like the Arab Muslim government. We are just the Syrian government, right? So that has kind of been destroyed. Look at Nasser, look at like the PLO, the other sort of secular configurations, like Marxist liberation in Palestine kind of destroyed, right? Pan-Arabism from Egypt kind of like destroyed. And I think that has happened because of the West and Israel. Israel, Netanyahu kind of sort of infamously passing suitcases of cash to Hamas in order to, retain some of their power before October 7th, because they wanted these sort of people that they could characterize as terrorists and Islamic fundamentalists. But this is a sort of problem because they shot themselves in the foot now, because instead of having like someone like Gaddafi, right, a perfect secular Arabist who will give up his nuclear weapons, and try to do diplomacy, well, now you've got these hardliners, and you've got hardliners in almost every country, whether they're in the militia or they're in the government. Iraqi militias, you've got the Iranian government, there's militias in Lebanon, there's militias in Syria even, and a lot of them are religious fundamentalists, but they are fighting for a just cause. And so now you have the people fighting for a just cause, and they're also willing to die because they think it's, part of this spiritual battle. It's God's will. So that's a more intractable enemy in a way, because it's much harder to negotiate with those people. They're willing to martyr themselves, versus the secularists who are more like, okay, well, let's do diplomacy and we'll kind of go along to continue to get peace, And so I think that's interesting. I think they've created their own destruction in a way, is kind of what I'm viewing throughout this whole thing. And I don't think they realize it yet. I think they're in denial, Israel and the West. And I think they're doubling down, unfortunately. I mean, let's go to a story here. U.S. military ups the maximum enlistment age to 42. And I believe, I won't read this whole article, but I believe they're also getting rid of marijuana screening. There was a Telegram rumor that they were going to start they're
going to raise the selective service.
The selective service age to 30 something, right?
30.
Which I think are just rumors now. Those are unconfirmed, but they're all sort of heading in a direction. And I think as we speak, there are Marines headed for Iran to somewhere. They say they're going to Karg Island, but I sort of doubt that. I think that's probably some sort of fake out, because that would be suicidal. But anything will be suicidal, so who knows? But yeah, there's another one of our predictions from last episode that they're going to start ramping up the amount of American military personnel that they are sending. And this could quickly. Here's my sort of new prediction is that the parallels with the Ukraine war and this war are only going to continue. And that does scare me. Number one, we talked about it last time too with possible conscription, but the people may be coming to your doors and trying to snatch you up to get you into the U.S. military if this continues, because it's going to be a meat grinder in Iran, and they're only going. This is going to be Vietnam syndrome. They're only going to continue to throw bodies at the situation and say, well, if there's 5,000 people that died, well, maybe 10,000 people will do it. Well, maybe 20,000. Well, maybe 40. Well, maybe 100. And that's just going to churn through the whole military until they have to conscript people and call people up.
Well, they won't even admit the casualties. We'll be deep into this war, and there'll be tens of thousands of Americans will have died. And I think they will still say that it's 400, 1,400, or some ridiculously low number that obviously is not true.
They say it's like 6 or something in the first couple of days. Oh, only 6 people died in the Fifth Fleet Bahrainian base. I mean, there's no way.
It's hundreds at this point.
And I think this is another unconfirmed story, and I was trying to look for it just now, but via a Telegram channel, I did hear that they were literally trying to classify casualties, like as a policy for some. They always say national security, but right now it is very hard, and I'll say this. To be sympathetic to the normies in America who don't understand what's going on. Because if you do follow the regular news, all you get is a bit of like, oh, we somehow lost an F-35. Oh, 2 people got injured. 2 people got wounded or something. And the reality of the situation is, I haven't seen the Iranian numbers, but I'm sure they have numbers, and it's most likely in the hundreds, if not thousands, of casualties. I'm talking dead and wounded and MIA, because there's probably people wandering the desert right now because they can't get into a hotel, because the hotels that they're housing them at are getting drones thrown at them. And most people in America don't know that, because the Pentagon will not it publicly will not accept that they are taking any losses, and the rate at which they are simply making things up about we crashed into each other, or our own air defense shot our own planes out of the air, or we lost some people, or just not saying anything is honestly a little scary, because it means we're in denial, and it's hard to that will just lead to escalation, basically continuing to be in denial. And I said this to you privately, but I'll say it here, like, if Trump doesn't do what he did in the Yemeni war, or the Yemeni conflict, I guess, I think it was called Operation Prosperity Guardian, where he sent some naval ships there to try and unclog the the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, I believe it's called, and they promptly lost 2 F-35s overboard, and retreated. But he just said, "Okay, we won, so that's why we left." He could do that, maybe somehow feasibly, but if he doesn't do something like that very soon, and I mean within the next week or 2 maybe, then I think we're pretty much on the escalator, as Alexander Mercouris calls it, the escalation escalator, right? When you get on the escalator, you only go up, and you stand in place, but you go up. You can run up the escalator, and you'll be going up faster, but the only way that you get off the escalator is you jump off, or you run back down extremely fast the other way, right? So when you get on the escalator and you stand still, you're going up. So that's what's happening now, is we don't even necessarily have to drop a nuke on Iran. We can just do the regular tit for tat American military way, and that will continue to escalate the situation. And the problem is now, Iran put out a certain number of terms, right? I think you've seen this. They want reparations, for their lost sanctions, the sanctions regime that's lost them a lot of money. They want every military base and asset of the Americans in the West expelled from the region. They want, I'm not sure. There's a few number of things, and they're all sort of reasonable. I would say pretty reasonable, to be honest with you. But for the American military and the American political system, they're so totally out of the question. And conversely, the Americans want Iran to get a new government, have regime change. They want them to dismantle their whole nuclear program and dismantle their whole medium-range ballistic missile program, which is insane. And they want them to have probably more sanctions. They want them to be looted by American Western companies, which also are things that the Iranians will never, ever capitulate to at this point. So where does that lead us? That only leads us to someone has to stop the escalation on their own, or they keep going and escalating and stepping on the escalator and moving up until one of them is totally and wholly defeated to the point that they simply logistically cannot continue to fight back. And I don't know what that point is. And Iran has a lot of people and a lot of weaponry and a lot of hard places to get to and touch. So that could be a long time. And America has a lot of people and a lot of weaponry and so we also have similar, I think we will lose, but based on our economy collapsing, but we have a lot to expend, and so that's the scary part here, is that there's a lot to blow up before I think the hubris of the Americans will come around and say, we can't do this anymore. Like, a lot of these people are maniacs, and they don't care if half of American economy gets destroyed. They'll keep going, until they physically can't. So I don't know. It's just scary to me. Any thoughts?
It's such a such an unpredictable moment that we're in. This thing is, I think it is destined to get larger and more serious. And I think those announcements about the enlistment age range. I think we're inching towards a draft. It's something that I believe is likely to happen. Maybe I think it's probable it's going to happen. America is going to double down. It would be a good thing if Trump just admitted defeat and agreed to Iran's terms, but came up with some sort of declared victory. When you're defeated, we've achieved our objectives, and withdrew from the region and paid them some sort of sum of money that they masked as something else, whatever, laundered it or something to try not to avoid the humiliation of this historic defeat. But I think that is unlikely.
Yeah.
And we're just going to see this thing widen. We're going to see America commit more and more resources to this. Israel commit more and more resources. Because ultimately, when we look at these non-existent state, or these so-called states, these Arabic states that are fully being controlled by the United States, Israel's kind of the last one to go. When the Arabs start to collapse, the Arab states start to collapse and get re-engineered, reborn as something else. They become part of larger countries or whatever. When the political infrastructure of those countries starts to collapse and is reconstructed as something else, Israel is the last one to go, and America is going to fight tooth and nail for Israel. You were telling me the other day that you thought, Israel is essentially a mirror sort of project to the United States, where they're both settler colonies, and it's the old way of doing colonialism. And America has a history that is essentially built on, it's built on genocide, theft, and slavery. That's like our national mythology. That's what we are as a nation. That is the foundational history of our entire mythology for what defines us. If the myth of Israel starts to crumble, which is built on a similar genocide and theft, then America itself, which I think is in an identity crisis, especially for younger people, about what really is America. What is this place that we exist in? Is it a place where you can thrive and build a better life, or is it a slave society where you work to enrich your corporate masters? That is going to come more into question in a time when it is already fragile and doesn't really have much to stand on. What do we stand for as a nation? What kind of promise do we offer people who are born here and grow up here? When Israel falls, it's going to put us in even more of a bind. We've known for a long time, how atrocious Israel is, and how they're criminals, and they're the worst kinds of settlers and people in the world go there. Their politicians are horrible. Their history is built on destruction and pillaging. But America, for a long time, the Western propaganda was able to create a facade where that society seemed palatable, and it seemed just. It seemed like a fair society. It seemed like it was a sort of a reparations for the Holocaust, and it was something that was a good thing. And they maintained the propaganda until now, where the grotesqueness of it all it can't be contained anymore. I think we're headed on so many levels. America won't let go of this proxy country. It won't let go of control of the region for oil and for geopolitical dominance. It won't let control of its military perception around the world as an undefeated power that can't be challenged. It doesn't want to let go of its hegemony, its economic hegemony, and all of the indicators, all the fundamentals are pointing towards a larger war, an escalation, towards what we're saying the last time we were discussing this. It's towards World War III, and that's what we're in right now. That's what this is. It may seem small right now. It might seem like it doesn't necessarily affect your life. Oh, gas is up to $1. That sucks. I can't afford that though. This is going to get worse and worse and worse. For America, if you live in America, it's going to get worse. If you live in Thailand, it's going to get worse. If you live in China, it's still going to get worse. Everywhere in the world is going to become a harder place to live every year until the political tensions, the imperial tensions, are resolved, and America is defeated. And, that's just something that we're going to have to figure out how to adapt to. If you're doing something smart right now, it's just you're farming, and you've been a farmer for a long time. But I think it's possible we get to a point where, with the lack of petroleum fertilizer and the lack of the capacity to farm conventionally, that food prices are going to become so astronomically high because we just, it doesn't even matter how high the food prices will go if there's just not enough food to go around, that we're going to be seeing famine, and it'll probably start in other places, but it's gonna. I think it'll hit here. We're living in a society of concentrated wealth. There's no even attempt to really manage access to resources for ordinary people. They'll make gestures, but there's no serious attempt at that. We're gonna be living in a very different society. Europe is gonna be much worse for Europe. The old empires in Europe are going to face an even harder situation. America, at least, is a large, resource-rich place.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go back to living the lives that we are all living now. It's just going to be a different world. It's a different economic system is going to come out of this. A different political order is going to come out of this. And a different direction and a different plan for it's essentially.
Wait, can you repeat that last thing? I lost you for a sec.
A different plan for the future of humanity is going to come out of this. The direction for human beings,
right, yeah,
to go, the lives that we want to live, the societies that we've constructed, and what is exactly is the direction that these societies are. What is the plan for our current society?
Yeah.
If you ask yourself that, at first you find yourself sort of scratching your head, thinking, "Well, the politicians don't have a plan." And then you realize, well, their plan is to, fuck everybody else. I'm going to get mine.
Right. Cannibalize everything until, well, I don't know. There's nothing left except for them, which means total death and destruction. So, and I think this is one thing I wanted to say in general, but especially on this podcast. And I'm not religious. I'm not. I was like an atheist. I was like in the new atheist, Richard Hitchens and watching all that growing up, and I don't go to church. I don't pray. I don't read scripture. But all I say is there is living in America at this time really has made me realize that there is evil that walks among us. And I don't mean that I don't mean to underestimate that or overestimate that. I don't mean to be like there's supernatural, satanic, aliens or that there's just people that are mean. I mean, there are people in this country, in this very county that I live in, that do things that are so unspeakable that it would make your stomach churn and it would destroy your whole mental state to know what they do. And I think more and more we realize that in the West, without some sort of real meta narrative, whether it is class, Marxist, sort of structural like that, or religious, um, or anything really, without any sort of meta narrative, and just living in this sort of positivist system of just accumulate, it's really led to this rot in America. And I think what people will come to realize, and I've come to realize it because I've been in denial about a lot of things in my life, and I've tried to realize those things and understand how to, move past that, or try and at least internalize that, and that's the only thing you can do. But what I think a lot of people will realize is that most of the American project for the past 20 years at least has been some sort of a mirage. It has been some sort of a weird project that sort of happened to be supremely prosperous only by chance, and as well as force and destruction, and that there is no meaning to that. There is no larger truth to that America is promised this, or that Europe is better than this, or that the West is smarter or more articulate or more developed or more populous or more anything. And people are realizing that slowly, but a lot of people right now are in denial, like I've said. But people will realize that this is a mirage, this society that we live in, because even America, like you said, which is resource rich and relatively insulated from other continents, I mean, I try to tell people this every day. There is a waterfall, a giant, massive tsunami of commodities, products, and resources that flow into this country. And what flows out of it in return, except for paper or ones and zeros? Not a lot. That is untenable, period. It's a scam. It's a scheme. And there is no fundamental, larger project backing it, behind that. It's a scam. That's literally all it is. And if you realize that, it's hard to live in America. It's hard to live in America, period. The prices of things are already unaffordable. I switched my plates, I think yesterday. Guess how much money it cost me to switch out my license plates, which in America are made by prison slave laborers. It cost me $227 to get new license plates. Actually, it's Pennsylvania, so I got one license plate. And now I have to go get it inspected. And this is a car that you drove, that your sister drove, that somebody else. It has 230,000 miles on it, for Christ's sake. It was a luxury car 30 years ago, and it's still kicking, thankfully. But this is insanity. I mean, in this country, people used to buy a beater car for $500, and they'd be having an old Honda Civic, and they'd drive that till the wheels fell off for 10 years. Now, this old beater car, it's the cost to insure it, to buy gas for it, to get new plates, to get it inspected is the money you've put in that car from buying it and maintaining it and doing all these fees, these rents. I mean, it's probably quadruple, if not quintuple, what the actual car is worth. So that's how untenable it is. And here's the double valence of the situation is even just that is already, our whole country is based around car ownership, which makes no sense. It makes no sense. In every other country, everyone has a bike and a scooter and a little tuk-tuk, and they take the train, and they take buses everywhere, and having a car is a luxury. So this is the mirage, right? This is the double valence of it. Our country was built on this mirage, and now people are realizing, okay, our standard of living is not that good anymore. That sucks. But that's also normal, right? Like a normal country, we wouldn't be able for everyone to have a new car anyway. So that's normal countries are like that. But the problem is we weren't built like Vietnam, where they built the infrastructure for 1 million people with scooters and 1 million people to get a Grab for 30 cents. We built the infrastructure thinking that everyone would have this sort of standard of living, and now we don't. And so, oh my god, my internet's going out. The other day on the farm, my coworker's water went out. The gas is going up. I just can't help but think and realize that things are hitting a wall right now. And I don't know where they go. I thought after COVID, we constantly had this discussion. Should we leave? Should we go to Russia? Should we get out to China? No. It's going to take a few more years. My red line for me was always the draft. That was always my red line. I always told my parents that too, because my parents were always like, we don't want you to go to war. And I was like, look, me personally, if they draft me, I'm not in this country. You know what I mean? And we're talking about it. We're predicting it. We've predicted a lot of things that have come true within days and weeks. And so that might be a reality soon, and I thought that would take China war in 20 years, but it's happening faster and faster. And it just underscores the thing that I've been saying at the end of almost every episode, which is, and I hate to say this, but if you can get out of America, I would. But like you said, though, everywhere is going to be affected by this. Everywhere. I mean, this is a world war right now. And who knows how long it's going to take to deplete one or the other sides. Let me bring up this story on this, because that just reminds me about Hezbollah, which I really gotta hand it to them, because after the fall of Syria and Hezbollah getting decapitated, meaning like Israelis assassinating their top leadership, there were all these talks from the sort of axis of resistance analysts that were like, no, they're reorganizing and they're recouping, and I was a bit skeptical. I said, really, because you're in the middle of Lebanon and now your rat lines from Syria to get arms are kind of gone, and are you guys really redoing? Is it really, or are you just defeated for the time being? But no, we've lost Conrad. Let's see if we can get him back. There we go. As you can, I was about to say, as you can see, the infrastructure of America is crumbling because the internet never works anymore. Let's just do one more story and then maybe wrap it up. I don't know if you have any other things you wanted to get into.
Yeah, no, that'll work.
We've already been going for like an hour and a half. So yeah, the story I wanted to talk about was Hezbollah, because they were sort of restructuring, and recently they've been targeting Israel's invasion into southern Lebanon, southern Beirut. And I'm reading from Vocal Politics 1 on Twitter, who is reporting this. There's been a Merkava massacre. Hezbollah destroyed/disabled 21 Merkava tanks in southern Lebanon and northern occupied Palestine yesterday. As of this morning, get ready for this number, they've achieved direct hits on at least 20, making a total of at least 73 Merkava tanks taken out since March 2nd. So Merkava tanks are, I think, $3 million each on the low end. So 73 tanks. Oh, that's not faring very good for Israel. And once again, just like the story last episode about the Iraqi Shia militia, the SAD, negotiating a ceasefire so that the NATO forces could leave. I mean, this is not Iran. This is just a force that Iran probably gives some money and some weaponry to. And they seem to be dismantling Israel, at least in southern Lebanon. I mean, how long do you think Israel can last at this rate?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think it could. I mean, it's with that. It depends on America's degree of support. Years maybe. I don't know. It's just the situation there is just going to get exponentially more desperate. I think it's however bad things are in America or wherever in Europe, that it's going to be far worse in Israel. It's not a place that if you live there, I don't know. First of all, why
do you live there?
you would make that decision. But things are just, they're going to become extremely problematic. And I have no idea how long they can last for, years maybe. But maybe less than that.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know politically, and once again, this is less analysis and more straight chance predictions, but militarily, I mean, at that rate, that's just in Lebanon, I think I heard a report that the defense minister, or maybe the highest general of the IDF, was saying that, the army is approaching imminent collapse, and they have started to call up, I think now 450,000 reservists, and there are getting more tensions between the Orthodox who are more anti-war, or at least some of them who are more anti-conscription and they don't want to fight in the army, and the more liberal, secular Israelis, they're kind of clashing with that because they see that they've been deployed 4 or 5 times, into different combat zones, and they see certain parts of their society that aren't deployed. And so I think that's creating a lot of internal divisions, and I don't know. I really don't know how long Israel can last. And I mean, I know I probably said that a lot about Ukraine too, but right, like as you said, they're getting another waterfall, another tsunami of arms and money from America. But then how long can that last, right? So I think it defensively, it's been breaking down. I think offensively, I really hope that within the next few weeks, they suffer a defeat somewhere, a big defeat in Lebanon, or even the Golan Heights in Syria, or, they get a large military installation gets destroyed by Iran. I really hope that, so that will speed up their destruction, because the longer they last, the more destruction they cause, But I also do think the Mossad and the covert actions are almost more destructive in a certain sense, because those things create these huge spectacles, and they create these sort of geopolitical ripples that create chaos that kind of embolden things more than just like a battle, and so who knows when that gets dismantled. The problem here is like Ukraine has to not only get defeated, they have to get denazified, right? A lot of Europe was defeated, but it wasn't denazified. Same with Israel. It's been defeated by Arab nations before, but they have to get de-Zionified. They have to get rid of Zionism in order for them to continue to exist and not be a threat. And who's going to do that? Iran can do that militarily, can defeat it, but is it going to march on Israel? That's halfway across West Asia. It would have to be probably Egypt, probably Syria, probably Jordan, probably Lebanon. A lot of those countries are already vassals for America, so that process is, who knows what that process is going to be like, and who knows how long that's going to take. But God willing, it will happen. Any predictions on the top of your mind right now?
For next week, I'm not entirely sure. I think, well, we're going to see oil continue to rise. We're going to see more instability in the stock market, which is going to continue to break down. I don't think we've got a lot longer left. I think we're going to see a dramatic collapse in the stock market at some point. It's down about 7% on the month. The S&P is down maybe a little bit less than that.
Yeah.
And we just saw, we were seeing gold and silver. It's something that I kind of, one of my pet things that I follow a lot. We're seeing gold and silver follow the decline in the stock market, but just yesterday, just last week, really, we saw them start to decouple, and gold actually went up while the stock market went down. So I think this may be a bottom for gold. Again, I would recommend buying gold if you got any extra money. Just buy a little bit, like a quarter ounce. If you live in the United States and you're watching this, and you're looking at buying gold, buy the American minted coins, American Eagles or gold buffaloes. If you've got a bunch of money laying around, you can buy gold buffalo. But those are easier to sell than say like gold bars and other things. You'll get a little bit better price for them. They're more expensive to buy, but it's probably worth it. I would recommend it. Everybody wants those. I think we're going to see a continued decline in the stock market. And I think, I don't know if I want to make this prediction or not, because, but at some point, I believe we're going to see a pretty significant false flag attack.
Ooh, that's a good prediction, and unfortunately, I think it's true. God help us. God help us all.
Yeah, we're really in for it.
Yeah. My predictions, totally agree with everything you said. I want to add in on the gold and silver. I think when the bond market starts to spike, the gold is going to go up as well. I think it's at 4.7 on the 10-year yield right now, which is kind of high. And if it goes into fives territory, keeps going, it doesn't look like it's going to stop. Gold's going to go up, silver's going to go up, and they're going to go up maybe astronomically, but I don't know if I would necessarily predict that, but they're going to go up a lot when that happens. I will also say, and I should have said this last time, but Conrad reminded me, Bitcoin is going down. The Epstein coin is going down, folks. I really think that there's going to be, and I know that there's been speculation, like the Petro Yuan has been facilitated sometimes by crypto payments to Iran. I think that's mostly been on what's called Tron, their platform, and through other stable coins. I'm not really sure that Bitcoin's really getting in on that because of the transaction times and the fluctuations in transaction costs. So I really don't think that's going to affect anything. I think Bitcoin has become a speculative stock in a certain sense. It's become a speculative Wall Street plaything, and I think as part of the Epstein class's tool to manipulate financial markets, and I think people are kind of over that. So I think that is, I don't think it's going to go to zero, but I think within the next few months, it may certainly crash to 40,000 or something in that range. And I really hope it does too, because I just hate Bitcoin. What else was I going to predict? I was going to predict something else. But the Bitcoin is pretty good. Yeah, buy gold, buy silver, buy a gun, buy seeds, buy gasoline, get water sources, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Happy
If you
birthday.
got the ability to have a garden going right now,
Get a victory garden.
That's going to save you a bunch of money. It's going to really be worth it. If you any amount of food that you can grow, do it now. Get ahead of the curve.
It's springtime. Plant it out, get a victory garden. That's what happened during the Depression. We're all going to be doing that. So please start that in some sort of fashion. DIY things, whatever you can, in any way you can. Yeah, happy birthday, Conrad. Glad Iran is winning. Even though it's a dark time in the West, in the world, because of this, but ultimately this needed to happen, unfortunately, and I think good will win out over evil, to bring the arc of the evil statement. I think evil is self-defeating. I always say that, and good will win out. Justice will prevail. And the empire will be defeated, but it's going to take a lot of pain before we get through there. So we all just got to hang on,
Yeah, the sun is shining on the other side.
Yeah.
It's going to be a beautiful future. I personally believe, from a historical perspective and an economic perspective, this is the collapse of the American empire.
Yeah.
And more than that is the collapse of and the end point of capitalism. China is a communist country. Russia is a country that has communist infrastructure that dominates its society. The world is going to be a socialist world after this. There's going to be no more market-driven, laissez-faire, liberal economic order. It's going to be a socialist world order. It's going to be a multipolar, self-deterministic, independent world order where countries have the capacity to have control over their own resources and and that the future, not the short-term future, but once we get through this mess, the future, I think, is going to be a bright, beautiful place. But we have to get through this period of war, which is going to be a difficult time. You're not crazy if you're freaking out. It's not. This is a time to be worried, but keep your center. Stay calm and do what you can in your life to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Don't just sit there and
be prepared.
Think, what's going to happen? Come up with a plan and prepare for this.
Be prepared. Freak out now so that you don't really have to... you'll freak out later, but freak out more now. If you're not freaking out, then maybe you are crazy. But salute to Iran. Salute to all our sovereign nations. I think we have to close with this, don't we?
Yeah. You crossed the ocean just to find your granted. Sacrificed your own boys for a lie. Listen. Yeah. Yeah. Make America great again. Yo, Tails, this shit crazy. Yeah, make America great again now. We will see what happens, yeah. Watch this. Sacred defense, we protecting the soil. While you sacrifice soldiers to pay for your spoil. You thought you ran the blow, sitting on your throne. Now we turning every base into a bed of stone. It's a slaughterhouse, a trap you couldn't see. Welcome to the graveyard of your vanity. The secrets are leaking, the pressure is rising. We locked on the target, and now you are hiding. LOSC. Yeah, we spelling at your name. Send them to the slaughter, you the only one to blame. Bleeding for a bucket while you shaking in your sweet. LOSC. Taste the ash of defeat. LOSC. Yeah, we spelling at your name. Send them to the slaughter, you the only one to blame. Bleeding for a bucket while you shaking in your sweet. LOSC. Taste the ash of defeat. Swag's fighting in your suit, hiding Epstein's ghost. You sent your boys to die on the bloody coast. Not a revenge for the leader's blood is purely mine. Every drop of his blood is a missile on the line. You thought you took him out, thought the fire was dead, but another common day is standing ahead. Yeah, you strike one down, we just shatter your brain. We put another in the leg, common day again. The secrets are leaking, the pressure is rising. We locked on the target, and now you are hiding. LOSC. Yeah, we spelling out your name. Send them to the slaughter, you the only one to blame. Bleeding for a puppet while you shaking in your sweet. LOSC. Taste the ash. LOSC. Yeah, we spelling out your name. Send them to the slaughter, you the only one to blame. Bleeding for a puppet while you shaking in your sweet. LOSC. Taste the ash of defeat. Take sacred defense of the homeland. Sacred defense of the homeland. Sacred defense of the homeland. The slaughterhouse is open. Common leg cat. LOSC.
Amazing stuff. God bless Moshtaba Kamani, the new supreme leader. He hasn't really showed his face, but his spirit, I think the spirit of vengeance has really come through. We'll see you guys later. That's been episode 4. Peace out.